You know that media technologies are not neutral. You know that dominant power structures will use any tool available to convince you that the way they need you to behave in order to keep their system functioning just so happens to also be the correct, moral, and natural way to be. This machine does not kill fascists. But you also know that media technologies are not evil. You know that the internet connects, the video educates, the computer empowers. So why does all of our current media technology feel like absolute rotten garbage? Because our lawmakers gave up enforcing antitrust, claiming that monopolies are more efficient, which allowed them to inshitify literally everything. So now, instead of choosing from a vast array of options, we are stuck with using tech giants or opting out altogether. And of course we're opting out. We're exhausted by social media and AI, algorithms and data centers and hashtag surveillance summer. But what can I do? Right? That's the question that comes up over and over again. What can I do? To find options, let's take a well-deserved break from the present and dive into the secret history of data and media technologies from the last 100 years. We're going on a little visit to all of our creative weirdo ancestors, the women and queers and crips and black folks, to see how their strategies of resistance can apply today. Spoilers, it's always collage. Welcome to the 1920s and 30s. It's the start of a brand new century. The world powers are collapsing. World War I is an unrelenting disaster. And when the dust settles, 1920s Germany is slam-packed with disabled veterans. The culture views these disabled soldiers as physically corrupt and less manly. Because, of course, you can't be disabled and manly. It's just not possible. I don't make the rules. This is sarcasm. And like clockwork, this self-hating nonsense leads directly to a massive rise in the political right. Sounds familiar, right? Mass media grows at an astonishing pace, particularly in Germany, which suddenly has illustrated magazines and periodicals in circulation in higher amounts than anywhere else in the world. Then, by the 1930s, people reacted to the perceived weakness and disability of the 1920s by aggressively projecting hyper-masculine, idealized industrial soldier archetype, preying on the fear of decline and promising to hashtag make Germany great again. To accomplish this goal, they tried to control forms of communication through censorship and propaganda. This included the control of newspapers, magazines, books, art, theater, music, movies, and radio. Into this mess steps our first two creative weirdo ancestors. First up in the 1920s is Hannah Höch. She's been working in embroidery and pattern making and book arts and publishing, which means that she has access to a massive library of popular magazines and advertisements. And she looks at this overwhelming deluge of image data and decides to slice it up. She becomes one of the originators of photomontage by pasting together mass reproduced media to construct new aggregate images. Combines the political with the domestic and explicitly alienating images from their original context. Then, as the 1930s roll on and the screws tighten, Claude Cahun, a non-binary artist, along with their life partner and artistic collaborator Marcel Moore, used the materials of the fascists to fight back. They listened to forbidden broadcasts, wrote down updates, and physically collaged together snippets of data, text, anti-Nazi slogans, and darkroom self-portraits into these tiny subversive collage zines. And they found that by placing notes inside cigarette packets, they were much more likely to be picked up and read. As authoritarians are consolidating massive media power to portray this hyper-masculine illusion, our ancestors fight back with two strategies that we're going to put on our list. Yes, we're making a list. Strategy 1 is alienation. Take the available data stream, chop it up, and build something new. And strategy 2 is surprise distribution, by placing work in an unexpected space where people will happen upon it. The 40s and 50s. World War II happens! The Soviets defeat the Germans with minor contributions from the Americans. The whole thing is an unrelenting global disaster. Millions and millions and millions of people are slaughtered. Once it's over, both the Soviets and the Americans decide that surveillance maxing is probably a great idea, and tracking the psychological data of entire populations an absolute must. This is well before the personal data is automatically siphoned up by algorithms like it is today. Data in the 40s is a paper bureaucracy with propaganda, monitoring, radio incepts, witch hunting, and unnecessary investigations. In the US, the Office of War Information is established to analyze public morale, map out mass psychological vulnerabilities, and engineer compliance. And at the exact same time, the field of psychoanalysis explodes in popularity, transforming into this massive cultural obsession used to categorize human anxieties and desires and neuroses. And by the 1950s, the war's over, the suburbs are booming, and data automation makes its television debut. In 1952, CBS uses a multi-ton UNIVAC mainframe computer on live TV to predict the presidential election. Standard opinion polls predicted a landslide victory for Stevenson, but the computer calculated an overwhelming victory for Eisenhower based on early returns. Walter Cronkite literally hides the computer's prediction until the final vote proves the machine was right. This was the exact moment that data automation became televised, changing the future of news forever. In the 1940s, men were tossed back onto the front lines yet again and told that absolute, unthinking physical sacrifice for the state is the only way to be a real man. And yet again, patriarchy treating men as disposable leaves them disabled, both physically shattered and psychologically broken. No wonder therapy speak was trending. And in that context, German-born photographer Greta Stern flees to Argentina and partners with the women's magazine Idilio to create one of the first examples of user-generated images. Readers mailed in descriptions of their dreams, and a sociologist interpreted them for a column named Psychoanalysis Will Help You. Stern took those descriptions and used darkroom collage to visualize their dreams. She shows working-class women turned into table lamps by giant men and dragging impossibly large boulders. And by the 50s, instead of questioning the structure that literally sacrificed them to war yet again, white men were mourning the loss of the self-made man as they transitioned from front lines and factories into suburban providers and corporate cogs. While at the same time, any hint of that same masculinity is used to violently punish black men living under the rigid caste system of Jim Crow. The brutal 1955 murder of 14-year-old Emmett Till is like the ultimate tragic baseline of the 1950s. White panic over fragile gender roles, racism, and a desire to control other people's bodies all meant that a black boy could be killed for not acting submissive enough to white authority. So of course, black and white artists have completely different relationships to resisting the era. By the 1950s, Hazel Scott becomes the first black American to host her own TV show. Scott is famous for jazzing the classics. She would start her live broadcasts playing perfect classical piano, and then mid-song she would slice it open, collaging in jazz and boogie-woogie. She is a powerhouse of black experimental music, and using the medium of live TV to perform in homes across America. That is, until her refusal to play for segregated crowds gets her dragged before the House of Un-American Activities Committee during the Red Scare. Meanwhile, Mary Ellen Butt, a white Texan filmmaker, is busy hacking laboratory hardware. She grabs a cathode ray oscilloscope. This is a piece of electronic lab equipment built to measure voltage frequencies, and she combines it with animation to create what she calls visual music. She turns the dials to choreograph electronic waves in perfect sync with audio and captures it all on motion picture film. So what do we learn from these two ancestors? As the global powers learn to weaponize mass psychological tracking and use violent submission to prop up the failing patriarchal ego, our ancestors add 3 more strategies to our list. Decentralized collaboration, crowdsourcing raw material, and using your skills to turn individual experience into collective public art. Live format splicing, meaning like taking traditional forms, splicing them together with new ones, and doing it all for a live audience. And laboratory hacking, looking at tools meant for optimization, measurement, and monitoring, and turning the dials until they produce art instead of compliance. The 1960s and 70s. So it's the middle of the century, and the Vietnam War and the moon landing are broadcast live on television. Yet another generation of poor men are sent off for the semi-annual blood sacrifice, while middle-class and rich men are suited and tied in NASA mission control and IBM boardrooms. The mainframe and the military-industrial complex solidify. Magnetic tape reels and solid-state circuits compute wartime logistics and corporate finance. That's the environment our next set of ancestors are working with. Shigeko Kobuta and her husband and collaborator Namjoon Park. They're some of the first artists to make video into sculptural installations. And together they use the variability of broadcast television in new contexts. They distort broadcasts by altering circuitry and combine broadcast television with other inputs like microphones, whose audio signal could alter the visuals. While Park's pieces are more distant, like this Buddha watching a live stream of itself on television, Kubuta's pieces are much more intimate, like this self-portrait. Plus, their work was done as part of the Fluxus movement, which created collaborative housing environments for artists. So that's our next strategy: hacking the hardware, cracking open the case, creating a new circuit, and giving the screen a body. By the 1970s, Intel produces the first microprocessors, but actually inputting data still heavily relies on punch cards. These paper cards have been used literally since the 1750s to program looms, and only later were used for computers. Isn't that mind-boggling? Holes in paper were the height of data storage for like 250 years. So as the state and corporations get in bed together, our creative weirdo ancestors go full embodied resistance. Black feminist artist Howardina Pindell looks at this ordinary bureaucratic tool and decides, let's turn it up to 1,000,000. She punches out 20,000 chads, labels each one with a randomly sequenced number, and then lays them out in this massive grid, all by hand. And at the same time, Olivia Corderillo programs the bodies of her dancers, creating one of the first electronic computer dances ever recorded. And at the same time, Vera Molnar paired algorithmically generated images drawn both by a plotter and by hand side by side. And that's our next strategy: to flesh the software, to draw, dance, and glue bodies made from the algorithm. The 1980s and 90s. Happy birthday, millennials. The personal computer appears. The AIDS epidemic explodes. Camcorders make home videos. The Cold War ends. Women claim a full 37% of computer science degrees. Shocking, I know. Masculinity goes full Terminator. The World Wide Web happened. LA rises up against police brutality. Modems spread and suddenly every teenager knows HTML. The dot-com booms and we spend literally thousands of hours preventing the Y2K bug from wiping out computer systems globally. Many people think that Y2K didn't happen just like by magic, but no, that was literally like tons of people patching things. And this is when creative ancestor John Doerr, an openly gay filmmaker, bored by the staggering cost of Hollywood production at this time, decides that home computers and consumer Betamax decks are the future of cinema. And he founds Easy TV in West Hollywood. It was YouTube before YouTube was YouTube. A place for anyone with a camera to show videos. There was experimental video art, there were mini docs on the AIDS pandemic, there was drag, there was home movies. It was queer and fun and lovely. Then, as the 90s log on, we get things like the Australian collective VNS Matrix, who create the 1991 Cyber Feminist Manifesto for the 21st Century. They plastered billboards and early web pages with radical, visceral declarations, and they proudly proclaimed themselves terminators of the moral code, with the goal of becoming the virus that infects the system, wanting to build a future of technology that was fluid, radical, and unapologetically feminist. So those are our next two strategies. Your story, your space. Meaning, use affordable consumer hardware to make stuff that you show in your space. And write the virus, not the viral. Write anything, write a lot. Bork the formatting. Twist the meanings. Ooze from the screen. Alright, we got one more strategy to go. 2000s and the 2010s. We're finally in the 21st century. Let's celebrate with 9/11 and a war on terror completely based on lies. State surveillance and Islamophobia. Web 2.0 that made the web interactive and user-generated platforms start popping up. The almighty iPhone appears. The economic crash of 2008 levels all of our hopes and dreams. And masculinity switches from Rambo to nerd. And the Silicon Valley coder archetype takes over. Why use muscles to control people when you can use code? Growth mindset, big data, big internet, too big to fail. We Google everything. Algorithms are everywhere. We watch Black Lives Matter and Me Too on our phones. Now, there are a million incredible creative weirdo ancestors from this area, but I wanted to share one I don't think you've heard of. Joiri Minara. Her series, #Dominican Women Google Search, showed how the algorithm consistently serves up hypersexualized, eroticized, and fetishized results designed for consumption. But she didn't just point it out, she used it as material. And that's our last strategy. Use what the algorithm gives you. Take it, tear it up, build what you need from it. Here's our list of 10 strats inspired by our creative weirdo ancestors that we can all use next time we are asking the question, so what do I do? 1. Alienation. Chop data into pieces and use it for something new. 2. Surprise distribution. Place your work in unexpected places where people will happen upon it. Crowdsourcing raw material and turning it into collective public art. Number 4, live format splicing. Taking traditional forms, splicing them with new, and doing it all for a live audience. New purposing. Taking a tool built for optimization, measuring, or monitoring, and turning the dials until they produce art instead of compliance. Hack the hardware. Make a new circuit, crack open the case, give the screen a new body. 7, flesh the software. Dance, draw, or glue a new body for the algorithm. 8, your story, your space. Use affordable consumer hardware to make stuff you only show in your space. Number 9, write the virus, not the viral. Write anything, write a lot, work the formatting, twist the meanings, ooze from the screen. Number 10, use what the algorithm gives you. Don't just consume, take it, tear it apart, and build what you need with it. All of these techniques come down to making choices about media and technology. Taking from the materials that the world puts in front of you, reshaping it through your own processes, and finding new ways to deliver that to the people who need to see it. And yes, I said need. I need you to make stuff. We all need to be making stuff and stop leaving the making to other people. It can be ugly, it can be pointless, it can be bad. And if you're frozen and you don't want to do it alone, I want to give you a boost. I'm going to host a live digital collage workshop on Patreon where we can all collage together and turn our individual experiences into collective art. I hope you'll join me. Let me know which one of these strategies you're willing to try and help me and Little Baby Channel grow with a like, some hype points, sharing it with someone who you think these strategies might be great for, and joining me over on Patreon where you can follow completely for free. But if you want to help keep me housed, you can subscribe to the Patreon. I will really appreciate it. Okay, bye!